Hello there and welcome to part 8 of You're Being Shaped, a series of videos I'm doing on Vance Packard's book The People Shapers. I was talking about Delgado again and his brain control experiments, and we are moving in briefly talking about hallucinogens such as LSD that can disrupt the normal electrochemistry of the brain, cause hallucinations, things like that. And connecting to that, I was speaking about how they have a real technology. You're not talking about chemicals here. You're talking about beaming thoughts into people's minds, altering certain parts of their brain that manipulating them to induce real hallucinations and even out of body experiences and things like that. I personally believe that we have this technology, and we're not being shown the cutting edge of this. Like I mentioned before, we're never shown the actual current up to date technologies. We're always led to believe that what we are shown is cutting edge when it's not. So, and as I said, I would say that the mind control technology that could be out there is so advanced that we almost wouldn't believe it. And so, if we were, and I think that there are people that are victims of it, that really, when taking this technology and seeing what you can actually do to a human being, a good, fake kind of cover would be alien abductions, wouldn't it? Or that would be if you can get your subject to believe that they're being abducted by aliens, then it's safe because you can hide behind the technology you're using, and they're never going to expect that it's actually man-made. So let's read on here and see how this can connect with what I've just said, because it says here, altering the mood. This is more Delgado's work. Altering the mood to eat or sleep. By electrical stimulation, Delgado has made gluttons out of cats. He speculates that perhaps people who chronically overeat may have abnormal nerve activity in the same area he was stimulating. He has also caused monkeys to ignore bananas, which they're usually fond of. It now looks as though we may be able to stimulate or induce the bioelectric, biochemical activity required to keep humans functioning without sleep. In the future, we will undoubtedly hear much more about modifying brain function by chemicals introduced into the bloodstream than about electrical implants. Implanting is so much more expensive. Also, except in institutions where coercion or promises of release are possible, he's probably referring to prisons there, implants have to be truly voluntary, and most people find the idea of electric charges going off in their heads unattractive. Now, this is in 1978, and I guess if you said to people in the 70s, what do you think about having a microchip in your body? That may probably frighten them, or they say, no way, we're going to agree to that. But people are already microchipped now. People have identification chips in them, certain areas of the world, that allow them access to doors without having to use keys and things like that. I'm sure there's iris scanner technology that people use. So this is becoming, steadily accepted. As I said, the You know, when people are introduced to the idea that's abnormal, the abnormal eventually becomes normal. Um, and it mentioned here about implants being so much more expensive. Again, this is the 70s, where to make a microchip, and you couldn't make it for, you know, very small really, compared to now. It was expensive. Now it probably costs next to nothing to create a microchip, and what you can put on there. They say they have microchips the size of a grain of rice. I think that's the identification chip. It's about the size of a rice. They have ones that can fit through a hypodermic needle. So the more, obviously, it's like a snowball effect with computer technology, isn't it? It gets faster and faster, and more advanced. So it's going to get it's becoming easier to reproduce. So that needs to be considered there. This book was written decades ago. But this is interesting here. It says, so it says, so we're saying implants have to be truly voluntarily, and most people find the idea of electric charges going off in their heads unattractive. And again, they haven't mentioned virtual reality, the lure of the virtual reality trip. As Alan Watts often says, you know, people will love their servitude if they're given the chance to have special powers like synthetic telepathy, you know, reading each other's minds, having out-of-body experiences, having virtual reality experiences that are even more real than this one here, so that they can escape. Just as Soma guaranteed that, you know, almost like they say, like a trip to the moon and back or something like that, and it was in A Brave New World. They were mentioning things like that with a microchip in the brain. God knows you could stimulate, you know, any part of the brain necessary to produce the desired effect, and I would say that could be more effective than chemicals. So something to consider there. But it says here, on the other hand, most people have very positive attitudes towards producing change by taking pills. And it says here, and they have already accepted medication via fluoridation of their drinking water. And this is a major topic, isn't it, on the conspiracy theories. Nuts such as myself, when they were saying, when I was, you know, when people were saying, you know, they've put fluoride in the water to make us more docile, and fluoride isn't good for the human body. It's poisonous, and people saying, oh no, it's good. And the fluoride in the toothpaste as well. They say it's good for your teeth, even though it says if you swallow some, seek medical advice. You know, So those who don't believe, how about that? It's saying in here, you know, we've accepted medication via fluoridation of our drinking water. Right, reading on. The use of implanted devices that sense the approach of an epileptic seizure, then head it off VI and electric stimulation by a computer is another possible use. Still another use is the use of self-stimulators for people who are terminally ill and are in pain. Again, we've got here the idea of a device that has connection to a computer. If you look at the idea of the brain chip, that's connected to an artificial. Well, a computer is an artificial intelligence, but if it's connected to a global artificial intelligence like a web, that's the same concept, I guess, but far more advanced. Reading on, as for electrical brain stimulators for instant regulation of mood and behaviour, the control of the stimulation handled by some other person, seen or unseen, is hard to justify except in experimentation and with informed consent. It might be justifiable upon request in medical situations. Okay. So again, I think of Wi-Fi, and how is Wi-Fi influencing our brains and our moods and all of that with this electromagnetic interference. You know, and that could be it, couldn't it? Reading on, looming above all these concerns, however, is the possibility that Control of her moods and behaviour may fall into other people's hands. This is what I'm talking about. Through such measures as placing chemicals in the water, or said that, or implants in the brain. Delgado established in his experiments that electrical stimulation always overrode human stimulation. The person would be challenged to make a fist. So the person would be, challenged to make a fist and look dumbly at his fingers as his fingers continued to flutter. In a thoroughgoing dictatorship, certain selected people could be required to submit to having 2 electrodes planted in their brains. One electrode would go to the pleasure centre, the other to the pain centre. Oh, right. So you've got like a Pavlovian thing about pain and pleasure, pleasure reward, pain punishment, and all that. Reading on, a baby could have a socket holding electrodes planted on or in his brain within a few months of birth, and the once human being thus controlled would be the cheapest of machines to create and operate. The cost of building even a simple robot like the Westinghouse Mechanical Man, I don't know what that is, but anyway, it's probably 10 times that of bearing and raising a child to the age of 16. Again, we're talking about the brain implants and chipping children with an implant at birth, is what I was talking about in the other videos I did. And it's like, as David Icke said, he calls it the totalitarian tiptoe. They get us used, as I said in my last video, to children having fingerprint scanners at school, and then next it'll be like maybe an identification card or something, and then the identification chip, and then the brain chip, and the abnormal can become the normal unless we don't put our foot down and do something about it now. So that's very, very relevant. So that's part 8, and let's continue this in part 9.